I think arguably we're already cashless. So at the moment we're sitting about 13% of transactions done in cash. Whether it will never get to completely zero, I think that's ridiculous. But at what point are we cashless? Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's not. So look, we're already there. We've taken cash and replaced cash with debit cards. So there's now 47 million debit card transactions, $50 per transaction. Sorry, 47 million cards at $50 per transaction. That's soaked up most of the cash usage. There's also other payment methods we use, but that's essentially what's happened.
I think the banks want Australia to become even more cashless. I'm not sure what your views are on whether or not that's a good thing. I mean, the banks argue that it's just too expensive to maintain that supply of cash, especially when you have to, pay contractors to, protect the cash and transport it great distances to the regions.
Look, I think there's a number of arguments in this, and one of them is that we're now paying for debit card transactions through surcharges. So we've soaked up all the cash, moved it to debit cards. We're now paying for that. But now we've got to pay for cash as well. At a certain point, I think the banks are going to have to make a decision about what business they're in and what the shape of these businesses actually are. Because I'm of the view that at a certain point, maybe the payments market is something that we need to consider more of as a utility than something to make money out of. So, yeah, 13% is causing problems for the banks, and I'm not sure they'll get a lot of sympathy for that. But there has to be some change within their system so that we can get cash to people who still need it. And there's a lot of people that outside the four walls of Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane that rely heavily on cash. We can't all just expect everyone to just move to the beat of our drum because we happen to like cards. So there has to be some kind of way that we look after everybody.
Absolutely, and I guess the question is, who bears that cost? I mean, Armaguard is now the last cash transport company, and they were crying poor not too long ago, and they managed to extract a $50 million bailout from the major banks and the supermarkets. I mean, what's to stop them from crying poor again and asking for more?
Yeah, well, we're almost at the 12-month mark for that, because that was the threat over Easter, I think, which is one of the biggest. You've got, Good Friday, Easter Monday, 2 public holidays and weekend in the middle, and then you say there's no cash. And that, will that happen again? Maybe they'll go back for a second stab, I don't know. But this is a problem that's come about. Arguably, it's of the banks and Armaguard's own making, and I won't make any friends for saying that. But, they've created a monopoly, they've got the situation they've got, and now they're saying, it's all too expensive, and Mr. Merchant or Mr. Customer, you're going to have to pay for it. I don't think that's necessarily reasonable.
And Brad, the next one might be a little controversial for some people, but the Albanese government has confirmed cheques will stop being issued by June 2028, which is really not that far away. And you've got a situation where a lot of young professionals probably have never even seen a cheque in their lives, or even a VCR or a cassette player. So, I mean, I guess it's becoming increasingly irrelevant, cheques, as they are getting phased out. So what are your thoughts on this?
Look, I haven't written a cheque for a number of years, and I've got a few years on you, but the reality is that consumers don't write cheques anymore, and we've had payment mechanisms like BPay since 1998 or thereabouts. So we pay our bills either through cards or either through BPay or some other electronic method. Where it's going to come into a problem is when you've got businesses that are heavily reliant on cheques still, and the legal fraternity is one of those, and some real estate companies still use cheques. A lot of this is not out of stubbornness, it's out of legislation, because there are pieces of legislation that still say a cheque must be issued, or the payment mechanism is a cheque. I think that needs to be covered as well. Cheques are very much on the decline. Every year the numbers just dwindle and dwindle. And again, the same argument for cash is the less that we have, the higher the cost. That's fine, but with cheques, there are alternative methods to pay between bank accounts. But we're not quite there yet for a like-for-like replacement, and I think that has to be addressed.